Shavua Tov. Today's daf is Lamed Beis, Communion Lev, but we'll start here on the bottom of Lamed Aleph Lamed Beis with Amar Rav Huna, a line and a half before the end of the Amud. And Rav Huna is commenting on the Mishnah. The Mishnah states that Niktam Rosho, he actually took a scissors and he cut off the top of the lulav, and it's possible. Amar Rav Huna says, let's differentiate between two very similar cases, but they're different. One is Oshel and Niktam, it was actually cut off. Aval Nistak, if split, the lulav has a split in it. We'll soon see that there are various categories and scenarios of a split lulav. But as a general rule, Rav Huna says, without getting into detail, that Nistak is kosher. As long as it wasn't cut off, you have the entire lulav intact. Just that some part of it is split, it's still kosher. And the Gemara is going to challenge Rav Huna from a brisa, and the brisa is clearly indicating that nistak is possible. And then the Gemara is going to differentiate between two cases of nistak, two different categories. So the Gemara asks for nistak kosher. Can you maintain Rav Huna that nistak is kosher? For Sanyo, we have brisa lulav kafu. Now the Bryce opens up with a list of areas, a list of lulavim that are disqualified. First on the list is kafuf. The lulav is bent over, and Rashi says, it's bent over. It looks like a fish hook. And here we go on to daf Lamed Beis, the daf for today. Another case of a disqualified lulav is kavutz. Kavutz, Rashi explains, has thorns, and the Gemara later on is going to quote a pasuk, and that which has thorns that protrude out of the lulav, and when you grab the lulav, you get pricked by these thorns. That's not drachel darchei noam, and it's possible. Saduk is the third of four cases that are listed here as possible, which is a contradiction to Rav Huna. And the fourth case is akum dome lemag. Oku means frakrut, we call it in Yiddish, right? It's curved over, and really, really curved over. This is even more profound than kafu with bento. How are you? But then we have something that is curved like a sickle, and it mamish goes like this, almost like a circle. However, the Brisa mentions as a separate category another of lulav, which is number 5 now, and that's charus. Now, charus means that apparently if they leave the lulav on the tree for too long of a period of time during the course of the winter, then the leaves of the lulav start spreading apart. And what happens is there's a process of hardening. And charus means that the lulav has become so hard, it's like a piece of wood. So the base of the lulav is hard like a piece of wood. And now what happens is you cannot possibly bend over the lulav. Like the leaves, for example, if they're bent, you can tie them together to the spine, which is Rabbi Yudish. But here it got so hard that it's not even possible to collapse the leaves together and tie them together. Tie them together on the spine. They can't be bent. In any event, if it's charus, if it's domel charus kosh, but although the lulav has been left for a long time on the tree during the winter months, and it began to get hard, but it's not totally hard. And in this case, there still is a certain element of moisture to it, and therefore it's possible that if the leaves began to be bent outward, you can bend them together and tie them to the spine of the lulav, and therefore it's still kosher. But in any event, our focus now is on the case of saduk, which is on the top of the page, and that's a contradiction to Rav Huna, because Rav Huna said that saduk, if the lulav is split, it's kosher. Amar Rav Papa says that there are extreme cases of saduk, and that's what the Brisa has in mind. And that extreme kind of saduk is possible. What's so extreme in that? So for this, we really have to know a little bit more about the lulav. And the lulav has many branches, but one branch of the lulav, one leaf, if you will, juts out above the others, like a tower, but there's one tower that's higher than the others. And we'll soon see there's a whole discussion about this called the tiomis. But what's important for us to know is that it's critical that that middle leaf should not be split. Now, if that middle leaf is split, then what your lulav is going to look like on the very top is a Y shape. That's called ham. And if you go out to the market to see the various lulavim that they sell, you will actually see lulavim that if you look very carefully, some people bring along their own magnifying glass, see it split like a ham. And that's considered possible. Why? Because that's not natural. That's not something that a lulav grows normally. It doesn't grow normally like a hamnik or a himnak, whichever way you pronounce it. So it's split in that way, right down the middle, going in two opposite directions, like an antenna of a little bug. So that Rav Huna was not referring to that kind of split. It's a split in the branches of the lulav, but it's not separated in such a way that it looks like that Y shape, the hymnic that we spoke about. Akum. Now the Gemara says akum, which we said is fakrum, it's curved around. It's not always possible. In some cases, a lulav which is curved is in its natural state. It could become curved in its natural state. Now I have a picture for you here, but honestly, doesn't do me justice. I'll tell you what I think the Gemara has in mind. I just couldn't wake up people who are sleeping in the room where I have this book with all the pictures in it. But I think what the Gemara is saying is that the difference between Lefanav and Li'achrav is that Lefanav means, let's say you're holding on to the lulav. What you're looking at in front of you is the shidra. If you were to turn the lulav around, which is if you're looking at someone who's holding a lulav, but from this side, you'll see the back of the spine. And what the Gemara is saying is that when is akum possible, that's only lefanav. Lefanav means that the lulav, as you're holding it, is curved outwardly. And that's not natural. But you have a picture of it?
I'm not sure. Which?
No, that's the thing. They
don't label the picture.
No. Oh, that's phantom, but that I think could be possible. Why? Because see, this is the front of the shidduch. So when the Gemara says the front of is possible, it means it's bent forward. If on the other hand it's bent towards you, and assuming he's showing you the side of you, but assuming you were holding frontal, that would still be kosher because Rava claims that's kibriyasa. That is still within the natural form of the lulav. Now what happens, and maybe that's what the diagram is, the next piece of the Gemara, litztada. What happens if you're looking at the face of the lulav and it is curved either towards the right or towards the left? That's called litztada. That maybe is what that picture is about. Litzdadim kilofanav dami. According to one girsa, it's absolutely disqualified. The Amila others say kili achrav dami, that it is kosher, and that's still considered kederach riyasa. We pass like the first nuskha here, the Lishna Kama of Rav Nachman, and we pass such a lulav if it's very curved, litzdadim. Amar Rav, hi lulava de solik bechad hutza. Now, if you look at a lulav, you'll see that the leaves of the lulav are shorter at the bottom. They get longer and longer until you get to the very top. Rav is describing a lulav that has only one leaf. I mean, it almost looks like a spine without any leaves, but it does have a leaf, but it doesn't break down into smaller leaves. And that he calls a Baal Mum. That's a blemished lulav. That's not something that qualifies as a lulav. And my impression is that when Rava employs the term Baal Mum, what he's trying to tell you is that it's not hadar. And you may recall the first Tosus in our Perek says that just like Esrog requires hadar, by virtue of Hekesh, lulav written in the same pasuk also requires hadar. And the beauty of a lulav is lost when it doesn't have these overlapping leaves that climb from the bottom of the lulav all the way to the top. That's called, in the language of Rava, a Baal Mum. Again, if we had more time, we would discuss the sugya of Sababa Avera, which is earlier in the parak, because the concept of mitzvah Avera is borrowed from Kodshin. And in Kodshin, we actually have a category of Psul Baal Mum. And the Baal Amor, and I think I also saw it in the Ritva, they hold that a lulav has almost a quasi-Kodshin status. It is like lifnai v'lifnim. It's almost like we're taking the lulav in front of the Shechina. It has a special ritzui, what's called ritzui. Now, I don't know what the word ritzui means. I mean, I know, but I can't describe it. But ritzui is a word. It's got ritzui karma. Shabbos also has ritzui karma. There's certain things in the entity, the universe of halach, that have a status of ritzui. Yeah, that's a very technical term. I mean, it has philosophical meanings as well. Ritzui means it brings down the will of God from on top, like a carbon. A carbon is also, it's all about ritzui. That's why there's a shift in our Shmon Esrei. We get to ritzei because now we're shifting to kodsh. Ritzei is all about kodsh. It's called avoda. Avoda has ritzui. Shabbos also has ritzui. It's almost like a carbon. And according to the Ritva, lulav has ritzui. When I say lulav, I mean the four meaning. And when you shake the lulav this way and that way, that's like tnufa. Yeah, these are very deep concepts. But in any event, it's not coincidental that Rava borrows the term Baal Mum here in this context, referring to a lulav. Anyway, nifritzu olav, the Mishnah apostles a lulav that has torn leaves. Omer of Papa, nifritzu the aviki chufya. When does the Mishnah disqualify a lulav that is nifritzu? And again, in the case of nifritzu, the leaves of the lulav are still attached, maybe just barely are still attached. Nifritzu the ifrude. However, if they're separated, then the lulav is still kosher. Apparently, Rav Papa is not sure about this. He is suggesting that perhaps, actually, I'm jumping ahead of myself. The next case is the case where Rav Papa is vacillating. Okay, so that according to Rav Papa, the case of nifritu, which the lulav is possible according to that Mishnah, that's when the leaves cannot be connected together. Now, the word chufya means in the old days, what they did is they took various branches that were not attached one to the other, leaves, they tied around, made a broom out of it. And that's a chufya. He's using the term chufya to describe nifrit. However, nifridu, if they're still attached at the base, even though they're very separate, still kosher. But the boyer of Papa, what about nechlika hatyomis ma? What happens in the case of a split? Until now, we said that a split is still kosher. That was Rav Huna, with the exception of a himna, right, where it looks like a Y. And now Rav Papa wants to know, maybe split is still kosher with regard to any of the leaves of the lulav, with the exception of one. There's one leaf which is holy of holies. You can't touch it. That's the tiomas. That's why when you see the experts, with their little microscopes, checking out a lulav, you'll see they're always looking at the top of the lulav. Even here in the Masechet, they have a picture of someone looking at a lulav through a magnifying glass. They're looking at the tiomas. The tiomas is a twin leaf, and it has to be smack against each other. That's what Rav Papa is vacillating about. That perhaps if there's the slightest split in the twin leaf on top, which is called the tiomas milashon twin, because it's two leaves that are absolutely connected to each other, then Rav Papa thinks it might be possible. Toshma, the Gemara wants to resolve this suffix of Rav Papa. Tiam Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, nitla hatiomes also. And now the Gemara is going to vacillate back and forth. Initially, the Gemara thinks that nitla hatiomes, if the twin leaf was completely removed from the lulav, then huadin neflika. The Gemara thinks that if it was split, it's not in its natural state, then for all intents and purposes, it's as if it was removed, completely removed. So the Gemara says, no. Lo nitla shiny. Nitla shiny. Not nitla means it's completely removed. And that's a different category of psul. Psul is not because of the special status of the tiomes as a leaf, which means it cannot be split, but rather it is a reflection of a different category of psul, the chaser leg. If you remove that leaf, you can remove leaves on the bottom of the leaf, but once you remove that middle leaf, which is called the tiomes, it's chaser. And chaser is possible. Now, the question is, why is chaser possible? When you're missing part of the lulav, or for that matter, of any of the four meaning. So here we have a basic machlokas rishonim, the nafkamina. According to one school of thought that seems to be headed up by the Tosfos, this chaser is a psul of hadar. And okay, I'll tell you the nafkamina in just a minute. The other approach is that chaser means it no longer has a shem lulav. It's missing a chunk. Doesn't have a shem esrog. It's missing a piece. And then nafkamina apparently would be, what's the status of what Rav Papa calls nechlecha tiomis? I'm sorry. What's the status of what Rav Yochanan calls nitla tiomes, the rest of sukkahs? If it's not a lulav at all, then you cannot use it any days of the Chag. If on the other hand it's a psul hadar, then it could be, and again, that's a very complicated, that's perhaps the most lumdish part of this third parak, if you're learning Be'iyun, is what's the deal with psulei hadar during the balance of the Chag. But in any event, there is one school of thought that would say that chaser, as a psul of hadar, is kosher for the rest of sukkahs, for the balance of the Chag. It's only possible on the first day.
Well, the first day, the lulav, when the lulav is the raisa,
The Rabbanan. So when the Rabbanan,
hadar is required for the first day.
according to one school of thought, the question is, hadar is so essential in defining the very definition of a lulav, such that if it's not hadar, it's possible. Or no, the Rabbanan created a mitzvah, a ma'aseh netila, but it doesn't mean that all the requirements that apply in the first day d'oraisa apply on the Rabbanan days, and the nafkamina might be chassid. So I'm just saying the question of nitla tiomes would be an issue during the balance of sukkah. This is the way we're going to paskin l'chumra, that a split in the tiomes has the same status as nitla, and it's considered chassid. Again, does that mean that it's possible called shiva? I don't know. That's going to be a major issue. The Mishnah tells us, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Rabbi Yehuda says that if it's separated on top, then you have to tie it together. You have to bind it together. Tanya, we learned in the Brisa. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Mishum, Rabbi Tarfon. And now we're going to understand the source of Rabbi Yehuda. Where did Rabbi Yehuda derive the conclusion that you have to bind the leaves of the lulav together? And that is based on the drasha of Rabbi Tarfon. It says kapos tmorim, and the vav is left out, but we read it as if there were a Vav. That's the Cree. So it's therefore kapos. Now, when you see a word that could be written, that could be vocalized in two different ways, depending on the vowels, then al pitorsh al peh, we are applying the flexibility law, and we're going to try to read it in a way that changes the vowels and derive conclusions. So instead of reading it kapos, we're going to read it kafus. Kafus means it's bound together. Im parud, and therefore Rabbi Tarfon derives from this drush of kafus that if the leaves were separated, then yichfetenim, he should do an act of kafus and bind them together. And that's the basis for Rabbi Yehuda. Amalei Ravina Rav Ashi Nimai Dehai Kapos Tmarim Lulavu. Who told you, which birdie whispered in your ear that when the Torah says Kapos Tmarim, it's referring specifically to a lulav? Who told you that? We're going to have this Gemara over and over again for all four minim. This is just the first of four occasions. Ema Charutza. We know that we're talking about a palm tree. It says Tmarim, that we know, but there are many different parts of a palm tree. Harusa is a branch of a palm tree that has become very hard. Rav Ashi says, Be'inon kafus v'lek. What does that mean, kafus? We have to have the possibility, at least, that there be separate leaves that could be tied together. Otherwise, the Torah would not use the word kafus. So charusa, which is one branch, and it cannot be split in any way, so therefore cannot be tied together. It's like, by definition, kafus. But the word kafus means that you will, under certain circumstances, tie it together. Now let's go to a different part of the palm tree, the ema ufsa. Ufsa is mamish the base of the palm tree. Now, honestly, I don't understand the havamina here that the base of the palm tree could be a lulav. We just finished saying that it has to be kafus. I don't know why the Gemara is going back and forth on the same shackle of Torah. The Gemara answers kafus michal dikaparud v'ai kafus miyomid liolam. The base or the trunk of the palm tree is permanently kafus, meaning it's by nature it's kafus. It's one hard branch, trunk.
Right.
So I don't know why the Gemara has to go back and forth the same thing twice. The ema kufa. This is a more challenging question, right? There's another part of the palm tree, which is a shoot of the palm tree. In other words, there's a branch, and it hasn't yet developed. It's in a very early stage. And the Gemara thinks that at this point, it does have various parts that could be tied together. But Omar Abaye says, and what this means is that in its early stage, when a lulav first develops on the tree, perhaps it's 1 year old on the tree, it has thorns. Remember, we discussed before that thorns make it impossible for you to take the lulav. The Torah says, you'd have to wear, special professional gloves that are made of almost metal. That's a violation of Jocher Dachino. And that's going to exclude a kufra. Amalei Rava, Tosfa, that's where he came from, L'Ravina. The Ema, Tarte Kape de Tamre. Just 1 second, I think I skipped something, no? Oh, no. Okay, we'll get to that. Okay. Amalei Rava, so L'Ravina. The Ema, Tarte Kape de Tamre. Wait a second. The word Kape, or kafus, plural, has two meanings. It could refer to the leaves of the palm tree, which we call lulav, or it could refer to the tamri, right? It says, as we said at the outset, it says kapos tmarim. Tmarim are dates. Now, if you've ever seen the dates, if you go down towards the Yam HaMelech, look up at the trees, you'll see that the dates are being held up by a certain branch. So you have an eshkol a cluster of dates that are being held by a branch. Maybe that branch itself is what the Torah wants, and with the tomorrow. So let's take 2 clusters of dates. That would be really interesting because, by the way, clusters of dates are very heavy. Anyway, a post-ksiv, the Torah leaves out a vav. And why did the Torah leave out the vav? To give it a singular grammatical form. So therefore, we don't need 2 clusters of dates. Okay, good. So let's take 1 cluster. And the Gemara answers, Lahu kaf arilu. When you talk about a cluster of dates, 1 single one, it's called kaf. And here it says kapos. So we're going to learn that we're referring to a lulav that has leaves, and kapos means that the leaves are bound together, either naturally or artificially. It says tzini abarzel, harabarzel, kshera. Now we're talking about palm trees, and there are 2 types of palm trees that are not getting the right amount of rain or sunlight, and therefore they are somewhat defective. One kind of palm tree that we're going to talk about that's defective grows on the mountains. And another kind of defective palm tree grows in the valleys. So when you have a palm tree that grows on flat land, on what we call plain, Plain, then it gets the proper nutrients, the rains, and the soil. Everything is perfect, and you'll get the lulav that you want. And in a case where you climb up a mountain and you find a lulav tree, a lulav tree on the mountain, apparently it's not getting the right proportions of sun or rain. And Abai is going to describe what these mountainous palm trees look like. If you take off the lulav, that it's not so defective. The Mishnah validates the use of these palm trees that grow high up on the mountain. Why? Abai comes to qualify, to restrict it. It's only in a case of Rosho Shalzeh, Magil Tzadikro Shalzeh. We're going to see this concept over and over again, like in Hadassah, we'll see. What it means is that the leaves connect one to another. There's no space between one leaf below it and the next leaf above it. They actually touch each other. And even though it's defective, it doesn't look like our leaves, which have, leaves that go all the way up towards the top, almost reaching the top. But nevertheless, it's still kosher. It has the basic definition and requirement of a lulav because one leaf reaches the bottom of the next leaf. But in the case of Ein Rosh Shel Zeh Magil Tzad Ikro Shel Zeh, the lulav that grows on the mountain might be very defective. And it's puzzled. At what point do I determine that it's very defective? When I have clumps of leaves that go here, and then another leaf here, and then another leaf on top. Take a look at Rashi on the bottom of the Rashi says about Tzini Harabarzel, and I suspect that Rashi's talking in the context of Abaya that we just said. He says, Lulavim Shalem ha'olim mu'atim v'shidra. The olive, the leaves are very, very sparse. There are very few of them. And not only that, each leaf is distanced from the other leaf, the social distance. And furthermore, they are very small in their length. And sometimes it's so defective. You have these small leaves that are so sparse, and one leaf doesn't even reach the level of the other leaf. You got this lulav that looks like that. And in that case, Abai says it would be possible. Anyanami Hochi, a Bryce to support Abaye. Sini our Barzal Psula. Wait a second. Banan Tanan Kshera. Our Mishnah says that this lulav is kosher. How do we reconcile these two prices? El Shmamina Ke Abaye. You have to use Abaye's distinction between where the tip of the lower leaf reaches the bottom of the top leaf on Shmamina, and therefore we have a clear-cut proof for Abaye.